Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Transformative Technology, Desktop Virtualization in Government, sponsored by Dell and IronBow Technologies on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jason Miller, your moderator. Our panelists today are Tom Cicela, Chief Technology Officer for the Army Information Technology Agency, Terry McCaw, the Deputy in the Joint Program Management Office for the Defense Intelligence Agency, Ryan Sobel, the Director of Enterprise Mobility Solutions for IronBow Technologies, and Keith Moreska, the Senior Sales Manager for Dell Federal Cloud Client Computing and Secure Multi-Level Security. Now, gentlemen, before break, Keith, you ended on a really interesting note. You talked about maybe not everyone gets VDI, and I think that's interesting because you hear about something like VDI and thin client, and why not me? It's very similar, I guess, to mobile devices. We're going to define mobility in a second, Ryan, but mobile devices where everyone thought they should get one. Well, I'm important, I should get one. So, Tom, you guys actually at the Army Information Technology Agency decided not everyone's going to get VDI. Talk a little bit about that decision.
Right. Actually, as part of our requirements analysis process, we kind of went out and looked at a broad swath of our users and our customers, and we actually established an 80% threshold, and that was more or less given to us by the Joint Staff. We established a similar threshold for the Department of Army Headquarters. And so what we did is we said, well, 80% of the folks in the environment are really targeted to migrate to VDI, and so we had to what we call stratify our customer base, and we created high, medium, and low users. But the 80% for us are really our typical office users, the folks that don't have a very strong mobility requirement. We have two classes of users in the Pentagon that are very important to us. We have our command and control users, our C2 users, which very little downtime is the requirement. And we also have a large swath of folks that sit in the E-ring and the executives in the Pentagon that really need an occasionally connected type technology. And so they do not have the ability to be on the network at all the times. And so zero clients and VDI is really only effective if you have good, high-quality, low-latency bandwidth back to the server rooms. You can do it for a limited period of time, kind of in a narrow band situation. But we really have an offline requirement for a lot of our users, as well as 100% uptime for some of our users. It's really, burgeoning on 7.9s, frankly. So we kind of put them in the last 20% bucket, if you will, and the old adage that the last 20% takes 80% of the time. So that's kind of what we said, is we think we can do the quick 80% very rapidly, and we did. And so from the point that we actually started production deployment, we think it's really only going to take about 6 months to roll out 80% of Joint Staff, which is about 2,000 users on NIPR and 2,000 users on SIPR. It's the same 2,000 users, just different networks, right? And so we are investigating the MLS solution that Terry mentioned earlier to try and decrease the number of end devices that we need as well. And then we're struggling with right now, how do we address users that are not in the Pentagon or on the man, that have limited bandwidth, as well as folks who bona fidely need to be offline for a while. And so those technologies exist and they're emerging. They're not quite fully baked in our experience so far. So that's what we're looking at right now.
So this leads to the discussion on mobility as well. So I'm going to turn to Ryan from IronBow first to define mobility, because I know we had an interesting conversation previously about what is mobility. So Ryan, define it for us.
Yeah, so I think in this context for today, we're looking at a mobile user tying back to a virtual image, right? A virtual desktop image. So I know that mobility is a hot topic, and when we think of mobile, we usually think tablets, cell phones, and whatnot. So let's if we can, let's just sort of table that for now and just talk about how it relates to the virtual desktop image.
But this could be, so just to be clear, it could be anybody who is tying back to that VDI. So whether I'm from a desktop or a laptop or smartphone or whatever.
Correct. So anyone in the world at any place at any time, whether they're at a hotel or at home, in the office, or in a different building within on campus. So that's how I would sort of look at that mobile user tying back into or logging on to a virtual desktop into an image center.
And when we talk mobility, obviously security is a big deal too. Let me turn to Terry from DIA for a second. You guys have people around the world. You made that comment earlier. How is mobility fitting in with your idea of VDI?
Well, it gets back to having that one common gold image and making sure there's a consistent user experience regardless of where they log in. again, different workstations, different buildings are around the globe. I think what's important for us in terms of user mobility is it gets to the direction that we're headed with the IC desktop environment. Because within our legacy environments, we've always had some mobility within an agency, across organizations, or in different buildings within a particular region. But now with IC desktop environment, we have that mobility across the entire Intel community. So as we roll out IC DTE, what it basically does is open up the world to where, again, if I'm as a DI employee at an NGA facility, I can now go to a workstation, log in on my DTE account, and get my image, get all my applications, access to all my data. And that really is a huge driver when it comes to the goals of having more integrated intelligence, more information sharing, and also enhancing the security of that delivery, as we've referred to earlier.
What's the difference then between a VDI, for instance, and a VPN, a virtual private network? Because right now, for instance, you can log on, a lot of people log on through a VPN and they get their data and they get their network. They may not get their image, though. Is it less secure? Is it more secure? Is it just a better way of security?
It's a better way. It's more centralized control is what I would say, because with the common image through VDI, the important thing for us is configuration control, and it's making sure that we can enhance security. And it gets back to making sure that, again, we're up to date with our patches, that as we identify security threats, that we're able to more quickly respond to those. And you don't have multiple images, you don't have endpoints that you're trying to physically go out and patch. So there's that. There's also the fact that within the thin client environment, you have more control over that end user device. Big thing for us, obviously, is USB port policy. So we're able to centrally execute that policy across the entire enterprise, which obviously addresses any security threats.
Let me turn to Tom.
So we have SSL VPN right now for our solution, and what we're seeing with VDI is we can give the users their complete environment, their complete experience, and control it kind of down to the desktop level. But more importantly is when you SSL or you VPN in any form, whether it's SSL, VPN, or otherwise, is you're taking that data and you're removing it from the place that it exists and you're putting it on the remote location. And so if I VPN in from home, from my home computer, for example, that data is going to reside on my home computer, and that's a problem for us. And so VDI does allow us to pull all that data back into the data center, and effectively what I say is it shows a snapshot of the data via the screen. And if that data is captured in some manner, if it's not encrypted properly or whatever, you're really only seeing screenshots. You don't actually have access to the data. So the data loss protection is very high in that regard. And to that effect, even within the Pentagon, we went a step further, and we created a completely untrusted zone out in the building itself. What we have right now with hot ports is you have basically your Windows domain is extended out to the port, and if anyone were to plug into that port, effectively you get an IP address and have access to the domain control and other things. You might not be able to authenticate and get access to the data, but you still have the ability to potentially penetrate the network that way. In our new environment, it's a completely untrusted zone. You have to jump through not only a security server, but a connection server. And even then, once you get to the connection server, the only thing you get are screen images. So it's very much more layered. It's a lot easier to control, and we did, we CAC enabled the environment, so we have two-factor authentication, which is a much stronger form of authentication than just basic user ID and password. And so we are working right now to actually create a set of security servers that face the outside, effectively the public internet, so that you can do the same thing from anywhere at any time, any location. And that's really the goal, to support mobility from our perspective. You still require some sort of network connectivity. So if you have the disconnected requirement, then we're still trying to solve that. But we think that we can increase the 80% maybe up to 90, 95%, something like that.
And I know the CAC enablement, the PIV card, the HSPD12 card, that is a tough road for a lot of agencies. And I know DoD has been going through, okay, what works best. The NIST just put out the new publication on the derived credential. That could be a whole show in itself. But let me turn forward to Keith. You talked a little bit about the mobility issue and security and two-factor authentication. Are more and more agencies, from what you're seeing, your customers asking for that piece?
Yes, it's a critical aspect of mobility, is because as they start to embrace mobility and people to be able to access their data and their applications anywhere, anytime, is it in a secure fashion. From our tablets with built-in CAC and fingerprint readers and having those capabilities in there, plus being able to have the cybersecurity with Suite B and having those capabilities to tunnel back securely on multiple networks, and also to have the management software like, say, Absence, which is geographically aware of where you're at. Because, the individual may have access to the data and the apps, but do you want them having access to that data and apps in those locations? So if you know they're in the metro, no, you can't do these things. But if you're on the third floor of the home office, that's fine. And so you have to have those capabilities. So this all becomes very critical to making sure that you have a secure mobile VDI environment.
Or if you're in China, you may not want to access.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. That's a guess. I don't really know. Let's talk a little bit about workforce issues, because one of the things that we were talking about earlier was the idea of user experience. At the same time, you also have a group of technology people who are used to working on the system, securing the system, dealing with data centers and servers and desktops in a whole different way. When you guys, let me turn to Terry at DIA, when you guys moved into VDI, what did that do to your IT workforce? And at the same time, how did that IT workforce change in terms of the skills they needed?
Well, certainly going this direction is a change to the skill sets needed within your IT support workforce. So for us, in terms of the administrators who, were used to traditionally a server back-end infrastructure, now they have to be aware of a lot more of different considerations when it comes to troubleshooting, when it comes to supporting the customer, and be aware of customer endpoints, be more aware of applications. So it's a matter of them being more versatile in their knowledge and understanding what the issues are whenever problems arise. There's also, I think, a huge skill set shift when it comes to help desk personnel, because as they're going through the troubleshooting process, now instead of looking at traditional thick-thin environment, now again the aperture sort of opens up in terms of what the possibilities are when they're troubleshooting. Is it the thin client? Is it the application? Is it a network issue? Is it a storage device or something else? So that is a totally different skill set and mindset that's required, and it also means different processes for how you go about doing that troubleshooting. So it's not just a technical change. I think it's a cultural change, and certainly something that you have to be aware of when you're looking at the skill sets that you need moving forward.
What did you guys do to make sure that those systems administrators, those help desk people were trained up? Because again, this is not something that you turn on a switch and you have 6 months to wait for it. Sometimes I think it's probably a snowball in terms of it's a rolling effect.
Certainly training is a huge piece of that, making sure that you have folks that are on board that don't have the skill sets, make sure that they get the training that they need in order to do their duties. I would also say in terms of from a government perspective versus contractor perspective, on the government side, obviously it's a huge investment in training. On the contractor side, maybe we're able to shift out skill sets more quickly. That helps us to be able to adjust and support those new technologies. So that's always been an advantage for us.
Tom, did you guys have a very similar experience with help desk, or did you actually just end up maybe even just bringing in a contractor?
So we did actually, and we we were fortunate enough when we started the pilot. Honestly, it started relatively innocuously, and it really did snowball. But we had a good team that we built not only on the contractor side but on the government side. And the key thing is we started engaging with all of our stakeholders early, not only the customers but the help desk personnel. And we actually spent many hours training Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. For lots of reasons. Our Tier 1 help desk never had an experience with any sort of VDI solution because we are 100% traditional deployments right now. But we also had this handoff that we had to see between IT and the joint staff. And so if the trouble problem was not a zero client, was not something that could be fixed by a remoting into the virtual desktop, and it was something that was out in the ether, like a broken CAC reader or a monitor cable gone bad or something like this. That's where ITA had to, kind of transfer the call. What we do is a hot handoff between us and joint staff so that they can send their tier 2 people out. But we really saw a lot of training issues on the user side as well. CAC logging into VDI is a completely different user experience than their current traditional environment right now, and a lot of folks just kind of looked at the little box, which is a quarter of the size of the desktop, and kind of tilted their head and squinted their eyes, and I'm not sure what that is anymore, and so it was an interesting experience for us to try and kind of piece all those together from a stakeholder management perspective.
Huge change management issue, which leads us to our final question of the day, the lightning round, if you will. We've talked a lot about different parts of VDI, why it's important, benefits. changes that need to happen. So let's talk about, if you're an agency who's just going down this path of VDI, what are your 2 takeaways? Let me turn to Ryan from IronBow.
I would emphasize that there is many different ways to skin this cat, right? There's not one set way. Understand the infrastructure from the back end side to the middle portion of the management, the operations side, right on down to the end user. So the most important thing is there are many different technologies out there. Utilize them for what works best for your agency or your customers. But remember, in the end, it's the user, the end user that matters. If you're not giving them the UX or the experience that they need, they're going to obviously push back, and you'll probably not roll out virtual desktops anymore. So make sure that from the back end to the front side, that there's a lot of options out there. Do your due diligence, and your end users will be happy, and therefore you'll move forward.
All right, Keith, you get the last word. Give me your 2 quick takeaways.
Quickly, assess your environment, and again, that user experience, like Ryan said, is critical. And I'll also lastly say, don't expect that you're going to have immediate savings, but over the long run, 3 to 5 years, this is going to be far better for your environment, and you'll be happy you did it.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to the Dell and IronBow Technologies panel on transformative technology, desktop virtualization, and government on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm your moderator, Jason Miller. Our guests today were Tom Cicela, the Chief Technology Officer for the Army Information Technology Agency, Terry McCaw, Deputy in the Joint Program Management Office for the Defense Intelligence Agency, Ryan Sobel, the Director of Enterprise Mobility Solutions for IronBow Technologies, and Keith Maresca, the Senior Sales Manager for Dell Federal Cloud Client Computing and SecureView Multi-Level Security. If you missed any portion of this show, you can listen to the show in its entirety and on demand at federalnewsradio.com, keyword Dell.
On behalf of Dell Federal, IronBow Technologies, and our media hosts, thanks to Jason and the panel for this informative discussion. You'll be presented with some polling questions as you leave the webinar to help us improve future sessions. We appreciate your feedback. We'll have the archive from this session available shortly, and a link will be sent to you for you to share with your colleagues. Those of you who requested a training certificate for this webinar should receive it in the next 2 weeks. Be sure to register for upcoming webinars from WTOP, Federal News Radio, and Fed Insider. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.